Hi, Raider Jeff here again, and doing another video here. I'm at the outside of the stables here, taking some friends to see some horses and stuff, and I want to bring up the video that the chart that I saw about the old, the Scandinavian languages. Okay, came out of the Old Norse. It was from Jasper. It was from Sandberg. I can't remember the name of the language company exactly. It's Sandberg. So I can't remember your exact name of the company. Okay, but it's Jesper Sandberg's country company. And that focuses on Scandinavian languages, right? Which is pretty much all Northern European, right? So Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, all those languages. That's kind of the focal point. And there are other companies that kind of focus on those too, but they do other languages too. It kind of depends. But the chart that they put up was something from Old Norse, and it was really interesting to see in the first kind of the summary chart to see there's Swedish and Danish, or Swedish and Norwegian, were of two different sub varieties of Old Norse. And I said, that's interesting, because this explains why, linguistically, why Swedish and Norwegian are different, right? Even though neighboring countries. Then I made a post in there. I said, this is really interesting. And then they pointed to a chart that's actually more in detail, which points to the whole tree. And I think it's really important because they're considered Germanic languages. And then you can get from, it all comes from Proto-Germanic, right? So, and I don't want to go into all the details of this because that's going to kind of get, it would take a long time. You'd have to do your research. But I think what's really important to see is that there are branches of this, and they branch out from former prototype languages, right? So it's really important to see that. And English is actually related, and German is related to Swedish and Finnish and Swedish and Norwegian, and they're kind of distant cousins. And I think this is really important, really interesting to see. But I think not just from a linguistic point of view, but I think from a cultural point of view, and that's why I think I want to kind of bring up is that and I've got my book on working with the Germans, right? This video book I've been doing, and then working with Americans, I've been doing that, and working with the French. I've been making these video books, and I've been explaining cultural traits, not linguistic traits, but cultural traits. But it's really interesting now. I think it'd be a really cool research project. I mean, I don't think I'm going to do this. This should be a master's degree and thesis, or maybe in a doctoral degree thesis to do for someone to do. To think about what are the similarities and differences from cultural points of view of all the things I've been talking about, power distance and masculine and feminine approaches, and collectivism and individualism, all this kind of stuff. And I've been mentioning all these things in my video books, right? But if you compare now the German culture with Anglo-Saxon cultures, German cultures, okay? Because not just German, not Germany. It could be Austria, Switzerland, right? Liechtenstein, even even Dutch. I mean, this is a spectrum of these languages, right? And to compare not just the linguistic traits between these different languages with maybe some of the Scandinavian language with the English dialects, right? Because there are a lot of dialects here too. This gets kind of the person who made the chart, the original chart said they didn't get into the fact that some of these are actually dialects, but they're all dialects. They're all dialects. There is no such thing as language, and I got a whole video about that, right? What is language? It's just a thing we made up to group things together, right? But really, it's just dialects. So at the dialect level, if you don't look at it just linguistically, but look at it from culturally too, what are some of the cultural traits that I've been mentioning? And I think to overlap that with another fact, or another factor, that is, which of these languages are inland continental, right? Countries. Now, Germany does have, a border with, the Baltic Sea. I mean, they're on the sea, right? So up, and so does Poland, right? I mean, to Gdansk, and even up just a little bit north of Hamburg, right? So I mean, I've never been actually to Hamburg. I've been to Gdansk in Poland, right? But it's right in the sea. And but these are the majority of the country. These countries are inland, right? And so there's a lot of inland things. And then Switzerland's inland, and decent size inland, very inland, right, on the continent. Now, you do have the fact that in some of the Scandinavian countries, the majority of the populations, of the population of the countries, lives on the borders of, like at the sea, right? It's very, the population is very scarce in the, and there are islands too. Well, not Denmark, but but they're big islands, right? I mean, they're huge islands. They're not small islands. But there are some traits about island or insular cultures that you see that are different from mainland continental cultures. Even if they're related, and even if they're actually very related, and even if some of the islands are actually, dependent upon inland and continental things, kind of like the Antilles Islands, or the West Indies and the Antilles, and the Lesser Antilles, and all that. The upper Caribbean islands that are related to France, they're all small islands, right? So they have a relationship. They had a long-term relationship with France, and so. But you're going to see different cultures and different cultural traits on these islands. Now, what do you do if you turn these islands to huge? These are big huge, not a full continent, but populations are actually living, on the border, on coastal areas mainly, near coastal areas. And so, and heavy and populated, so they're not really heavily inland, which means that you're going to have the dialect, the languages are going to be not going to be very different, because you're not going to have huge differences. You're not going to, got the horses here neighing, but you're not going to have huge differences in dialect difference because of boundaries, right? Because you're not going to have a big population. That people that are living more on the borders of these islands, or the borders on the coast, so that it's going to be more homogenous. Really interesting to think about, from a dialectal point of view. Is it true? And something to think about. Does it happen? Now, when you compare the inland continental kind of cultural traits, these national traits, to insular ones from islands, is there differences? Out of that, another factor maybe of religious kind of backgrounds, Catholicism versus Protestantism versus, other flavors of different religions. How does that kind of come into place? Really something interesting to think about, and then compare them and see if there are some. How do they relate? How are they different and similar? And did this come to play with language, right? Something to think about it. So, have a good day. Just some thoughts, and maybe this would be something to do some research on, intensive research. We'll see. Thanks so much. Bye.